Chapter 2449, Killing the Leader Amidst an Army of Thousands. Chapter 2449, Killing the Leader Amidst an Army of Thousands. There were 3 types of insects, and all had their own uniquely frightening traits. The blood of the multi-legged insects was mighty poisonous. Even if they were dead, they would cause extremely great trouble. Furthermore, their numbers were overwhelming, and they were the most low-cost troops, but their practical value was extremely high. The horned insects could release lightning, which was very powerful, and the long-distance damage value was astonishing. But the most terrifying were the winged insects. Not only could they launch sneak attacks, they had great destructive power, and could even wound Ling Han with his physique. If it was any other person that had sustained such a blow, even if they could grasp it with their hands, they would still definitely be pierced right through. Only a celestial tool could block it. Be careful, Ling Han advised. Those insects with wings can launch sneak attacks, and they are extremely frightening. The indestructible heaven scroll channeled, and a golden seal appeared on Ling Han's body. Slivers of green smoke immediately wafted from his arm. That was the poison being evaporated. Indestructible heaven's scroll. Dongfang Rui and the others all cast their eyes over, showing a hint of envy. Every single heavenly venerate had their unique advantage. The karmic life heavenly venerable had reached the pinnacle level of defense. A very large part of the reason why he had managed to face off 1 against 9 and resist 9 heavenly venerates of the foreign realm all by himself in the past could be attributed to the indestructible heaven's scroll. This kind of pinnacle level defense was something that even the Green Flames heavenly venerate, Sealed Emotion heavenly venerable, and Jowu heavenly venerate were extremely tempted by. Unfortunately, the karmic life heavenly venerable had fused himself with Tao, and the Tower of 3 Realms had disappeared without a trace, and the indestructible heaven scroll had thus become lost. Now that it had shown itself again on Ling Han, Dongfang Rui and the others were naturally very envious. Xiao, another sneaky arrow came attacking, aimed directly for the Empress. But this time, the Empress was prepared. She swept out the divine demon sword, and sliced this arrow in half. There were only 4 winged insects, their numbers pitifully few, but their destructive power was extraordinarily great. Furthermore, they were hidden in dark corners and launching sneak attacks, which could not be guarded against. Everyone had to place a large share of their concentration on them. The moment these 4 insects appeared on the battlefield, they would be deadly weapons, and were capable of impeding a large portion of their focus. Ling Han frowned. These 4 insects definitely had to be gotten rid of. Otherwise, the pressure on their team would be too great. I'll go kill them, he declared. He did not immediately make his move, but was rather channeling the regulations of space. At present, he was surrounded by various powerful elites, so he could completely focus on storing up power and make his adjustments. Xiao, he suddenly moved. In a flash, he appeared in front of a winged insect, and then shot out a punch at it. At this time, it was the moment when that winged insect had unleashed a sneaky arrow. It was located in a relatively empty location, and when this punch from Ling Han flew out, it was aimed directly for the mouth that it was just closing. Previously, it had repeatedly launched sneaky arrows, yet now it had fallen into Ling Han's schemes, which could be considered as giving it a taste of its own medicine. The multi-legged insects in the area all released a strange cry, launching sound waves at Ling Han, and helping the winged insect out. With so many insects attacking at the same time, even Ling Han's physique could not bear it. Yet Ling Han ignored it completely. As he channeled the indestructible heaven's scroll, a golden light shimmered all over him. In this instant, his defense was boundlessly strong, possibly reaching the extremes of a first heaven celestial king. Peng, his punch landed, and directly burst the throat of that winged insect. Jade-green blood spurted everywhere, and a greyish gas also rose up at the same time, filled with the air of death. Peng, peng, peng. Countless sound waves were also assailing him, causing Ling Han's whole body to tremble from the impact. However, his present defense was frighteningly powerful. This could only shake him, but could not wound him. Now that Ling Han's attack had succeeded, he immediately retreated. In this kind of situation, he would not be able to hold up for too long, so he naturally had to escape. He retreated, and it was like countless multi-legged insects had gone insane, setting off in hot pursuit of him. Multiple layers of sound waves rained down, seriously disturbing the space, so Ling Han did not dare to rashly use teleportation. As much as possible, he did not retreat back into the ranks, and was instead sinking into an even more disadvantageous position. A field of lightning swept out, and even swept over a great many multilegged monsters. That was the show of might from the horned insects. Ling Han waved his fists in a furious barrage. With his loud cry, regulations and body art were deployed at the same time, and with the support of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, he had temporarily suppressed the poison. By now, he had recovered to his prime condition, and had incredibly terrifying battle prowess. There was no insect that could stop him. Wherever he passed, area after area of insects would be blasted flying. His speed was extremely fast as he rushed directly towards his team. The pressure was too great. The golden light all over his body very quickly dimmed. The indestructible Heaven's Scroll could no longer channel automatically, and along with that, the poison in Ling Han's body showed its might once more, causing his battle prowess to drop madly. Right at this moment, Ling Han suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. Without a second thought, he sent a punch flying. Pang! A dark arrow shot over, and he forcefully blasted it into bits. In the distance, a winged insect was presently closing its mouth slowly, and another arrow was quietly formed, its speed very fast. This actually was regulations solidified, and had no solid form. Once it was destroyed, it would only be shards of regulations as well. Fuck. Ling Han cast a few more looks at that winged insect. When he pulled himself together, the next one he was going to kill was this damn insect. He was covered with wounds all over, but finally managed to charge back into the ranks. A drop of indestructible true fluid circulated, and the injuries on his body immediately recovered. However, the poison could not be removed completely, and it was still difficult for his battle prowess to return to its prime condition. Recover your condition quickly. Soon, it will be your turn to switch shifts, Huoferong said. Everyone turned to look at him, showing a hint of admiration. To kill the enemy commander amidst an army of thousands. While it was not as simple as simply plucking an object from his pocket, how many pseudo-celestial kings could manage this feat? This should be the only one, and even Huoferong could not do so. That was because Huoferong was not versed in the regulations of space, and could not teleport right in front of the winged insect. Furthermore, if she penetrated the enemy ranks deeply, the winged insect, knowing how ferocious she was, would definitely retreat continuously. How could it be that it would just obediently wait for death? As for the others, there was probably absolutely zero chance they could kill it. They would have been blasted into bits halfway through. Ling Han flopped onto the ground, and ingested a few alchemical pills in succession. On the one hand, it was to suppress the poison in his body as much as possible, and on the other, his source power had also been seriously exhausted. Ji Wuming and the others were more and more strained. Primarily, it was because these three winged insects were extremely frightening as they would launch sneak shots occasionally. If it were not for the fact that one of them had already been killed off by Ling Han, the pressure on the group would definitely be even greater. Switch! Huoferong shouted loudly. The first team of 5 surged forth together, switching with Ji Wuming, the Empress, and the others. The flood of insects was still as it had been, wave after wave rushing towards them endlessly. Now that Ling Han had switched shifts, it naturally was impossible that he would have any more excess energy to kill the winged insects, which allowed those 3 winged insects to become even more unreserved in their attacks. Thankfully, after the death of a winged insect, they had slight wariness. Otherwise, their attacks would be even more unreserved. Fight, fight, fight. The insect blood spurted everywhere. All of them had become numb, the only thought left in their minds was battle. It was unknown how much time had passed. Ji Wuming and the others had more or less recovered, and switched back with them, beginning a cycle. As Ling Han rested, he swept out towards those 3 winged insects. These 3 damn insects definitely had to be gotten rid of, or their situation would only become worse. He tolerated them for a considerably long time, and then suddenly activated space teleportation, appearing next to a winged insect. He threw a punch, powerful and heavy. He was going to insta-kill this damn insect. But this time, These insects were all prepared. He had only just appeared when 13 multilegged insects released a sound wave, which turned into a massive boulder that crashed towards Ling Han. Damage was only secondary. Their primary motive was to send Ling Han flying, resolving the crisis that winged insect was in. Chapter 2450 Insect Queen. Chapter 2450 Insect Queen. Wang, series of sound waves assaulted, and it was incredibly terrifying. This time, the insects were all prepared. The moment Ling Han appeared, they would have already moved. If Ling Han did not parry them, he would only be sent flying by the sound waves. If he made a move in defense, his speed would definitely be impeded, allowing the winged insect an opportunity for escape. They had become smarter. Ling Han was stunned. He had attempted to communicate with these insects before, but had only discovered chaos on the other end. They were completely without intelligence. Now they actually knew how to attack to get their companion out of a crisis. How could their intelligence possibly grow so much in such a short few days' time? Ling Han did not believe this. There should be an insect that truly possessed intelligence that was communicating among them, gathering this pile of scattered sand into a united body. To defeat the enemy, the chief had to be captured first. A thought streaked through his mind. If the insect king could be killed, then this sea of insects might collapse. But with so many insects, where was he supposed to find a single insect kind? Furthermore, since the insect king had intelligence, it would definitely keep itself hidden. How could it be so easily discovered? Wang, Wang, Wang. The sound waves were already approaching. Ling Han put aside the thoughts in his mind. He definitely could not miss this chance. Otherwise, when the insects managed to deal with his sudden attacks, the chances of success would be even lower afterwards. He moved, and boundless light of time spread out. The wave of attack came to an abrupt halt, as if time had stopped. Ling Han directly barged over. Quang, the sound wave was destroyed, turning into solid shards that fell down, as if a crystal had been shattered. Xiao, Ling Han's figure soared over them. That winged insect had also been affected by the flow of time, its speed becoming overwhelmingly slow. It was just opening its mouth in Ling Han's direction, a sneaky arrow already ready to be released, emanating an eerily dark luster. Ling Han released a battle cry, sending out a punch that crashed towards the throat of that winged insect. Pu. Visibly, the end of an arrow pierced right through the back of the neck of that insect, but it immediately shattered. It was formed by regulations, and now that the winged insect had died, it naturally could no longer keep the form of the arrow that had been formed by regulations. Ling Han's attack had succeeded, and he immediately retreated. He felt like he was completely spent. Previously, he had channeled the regulations of time with his full energy, practically expending himself completely. If it were not for the fact that his body art was incredibly frightening, he would definitely have flopped onto the ground by now. He had clearly just increased the might of time flow by 20% to 30%, yet the source power he had expended had increased in tons. This quality-price ratio was really pitifully low. But for better or worse, he had succeeded, which pleased Ling Han greatly. Like a god of war, he charged back to his own ranks. With him killing 2 winged insects in a row, even those insects seemed to gain some fear. However, this only made their counterattack become even more berserk as they poured out towards Ling Han like a tsunami wave. Ling Han had been injured, but he did not channel the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. It had to be used at the most crucial moment. No insect could stop him. When Ling Han barged back to his own team, his whole body was bathed in green blood, which emanated an incredibly horrible stench. Hua Furong pressed down a palm. Green flames flickered, rapidly evaporating that blood, but slivers of greyish substance steamed out. The smell of it would turn anyone dizzy as they would feel a discomfort that could not be described. Ling Han flopped down, and hurriedly began to recuperate. Even Hua Furong nodded, and said, "Later, you can rest a while longer. I will take over for you the work that should be yours." Ling Han had killed 2 winged insects, greatly lightening the pressure on the team. This merit was something that no one could compare to. Ling Han was not reserved, either. Though he still had endless stamina, who knew what kind of monster would emerge from the insect nest? It was still better to be careful and keep his strength at a high level. Naturally, no one expressed disagreement with Huafurong's arrangements. The threat of the winged insects was something that they had all seen. Moreover, Ling Han had also killed countless multilegged insects and horned insects. The remaining 2 winged insects both showed hints of fear. They seemed to still possess survival instinct, and treasured their lives more. They both flapped their wings, and retreated behind the lines. They attacked only when they had reached a farther location. In this manner, the threat they posed had become considerably smaller. Everyone was holding on strongly, but there seemed to be no end to the sea of insects. No matter how much blood pooled on the ground from the insects they killed, they were still endless. This isn't a good way. Everyone's expression changed. They could still hold on, but the situation was becoming worse. That was because there was more and more poison collecting in their bodies. The effects on their battle prowess was also becoming greater. Hold on. Jiolan's hands formed a strange sign. Xiao, a shadow suddenly flew out of her body, and floated into the depths of the insect cave. It was visible, but wasn't actually solid. A great many insects were clearly attacking it, yet it seemed like it did not exist. Divine shadow skill? Huafurong nodded. This is the best technique for scouting enemies. Even if they discover it, they can do nothing to stop it. It has form but is not solid, like a shadow doppelganger that the heaven and earth has taken form in. After a while, Jiolan's figure trembled, and she suddenly snapped her eyes open. Her expression was filled with shock. There is an insect queen that is endlessly laying eggs, so fast that it is no slower than us killing them. Everyone was stunned. No wonder these insects couldn't be killed completely no matter how hard the group killed them. That was because there was an insect queen that was laying eggs at a shocking rate. In other words, there is no way that we can completely kill all these insects, Ji Wuming said grimly. There's only one solution. Huafurong continued. Ling Han nodded. We need to kill the insect queen. But just how difficult would it be to kill the insect queen? They needed to go against the flow, charge right towards that insect queen, and only then would they have a chance to make their move. It was something that could be explained easily with a few words, but to actually do it. Everyone looked at the insects that were flooding towards them from all directions like seawater, and felt a sense of helplessness rise up in their hearts. Fuck, this was too hard. This is our only way out. We have to do it. But they were all monarch stars, and had willpower that could not be matched. Immediately, they firmed their resolve. Die. No longer did they choose the strategy of half their members resting while the other half stayed on defense. Instead, they moved out all at once, going against the flow of the sea of insects. This was really too hard. The sea of insects was endless. Every step forwards required a bloody battle, expending an astonishing amount of energy. At this moment, who else would dare to hold anything back? They all used powerful moves. Divine light shone blindingly as they forcefully boosted themselves to Celestial King tier battle prowess. This allowed them to become unmatched. Peng, 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 it was as if they were an invincible spear, piercing through the waves and forging onwards while charging towards the innermost depths of the insect cave. Meanwhile, Ling Han weighed the heaven and earth origin stars in his hand. They had always been just a weapon to serve as an intimidation tactic. By the look of things, today was the day that they would finally show their might. They charged once more into the insect cave. Instantly, space enlarged countless folds over, with attacks rushing towards them from all directions. Where is the insect queen? Everyone asked. This place was enshrouded in darkness, and they couldn't see very far at all. Jiolan pointed at that mountain peak ahead of them. Where exactly? Everyone asked hurriedly. They, too, could guess that the insect queen was on the mountain, but they needed to know a more exact position. Otherwise, how were they supposed to kill it? Jiolan's expression was a little astounded. He was still pointing at the mountain, and said, "That is the insect queen." Everyone faltered at first, then realization dawned on them, and they all inhaled sharply. The mountain that they had seen was actually not a real mountain, but the insect queen itself. No wonder its rate of laying eggs was actually capable of catching up with the rate at which they killed the insects. It was around the size of a mountain, so it was definitely very fertile. Just how were they supposed to kill such a massive monster? Where were its vital points? Chapter 2451, Killing the Leader. Chapter 2451, Killing the Leader. Ling Han, the two of us will join forces, and we will kill this insect queen together, Hu Furong said. In this place, only Ling Han was barely qualified to be her equal. The others were all too weak, and even Ji Wuming was slightly inferior to her. Ling Han nodded. Without getting rid of the insect queen, they couldn't even think of surviving. Let's go. The two of them leaped out of the battle circle at the same time, charging towards that mountain. The two of them should be the strongest elites below the Celestial King tier at present. Even in a high-level dimension, it was probable that not many that were their equals could be found. The might of their combined forces was incredibly powerful. Like a hot knife through butter, they charged to the foot of the mountain. They had to do it in a single try. Otherwise, if their progress was impeded, they would perhaps be unable to advance any further. The two great elites had unleashed all their power, and it was unknown how many insects they had killed on their way when they finally charged to the foot of the mountain. Even Hu Furong had used a celestial tool. It was a mirror, and with a sweep of its blazing light, a multitude of insects would die in the aftermath. It was not just simply forged from divine metal, but had rather been forged into a celestial tool at the very least. It was a true pseudo-celestial tool, possessing extraordinary might. Meanwhile, Ling Han was wielding the divine demon sword. The success or failure of killing the insect queen implicated all of their lives. Thus, it was necessary that the two of them could unleash their greatest battle prowess possible. Reaching here, they could finally see the details. There was actually a pipe stretching downwards from the mountain, and this pipe was constantly wriggling. Every time it twisted, an insect larva would be birthed, and multi-legged insects would immediately come forwards to move it away. There were still a considerable number of these pipes. Though Ling Han and Hu Furong could not see too far, they had discovered 8 other such pipes on either side of them, and they were madly laying eggs. This is the insect queen's behind, so the head should be above. We'll charge upwards, and destroy its mind. The two of them exchanged their views. This insect queen had to have some special ability to communicate with all the insects, commanding them to attack. Based on the protection of the winged insects, the insect queen's intelligence was very extraordinary. They guessed that this swarm of insects should be akin to a beehive. The queen bee had a massive body, but did not have much mobility. It could only eat and lay eggs. In comparison, the insect queen here should have very strong spiritual power. Be careful, the two of them said to each other. A strong spiritual power meant that it was strong in the use of regulations as well. This insect queen might not be very mobile, but her battle prowess definitely could not be underestimated. They charged towards the summit. These insects seemed to have gone mad as they rushed towards the duo. One incredibly terrifying attack after another swept towards them. Peng, peng, peng. A lot of these attacks landed on the mountain, but the mountain was still immobile. It was like it really was an immobile divine mountain. Ling Han and Hu Furong exchanged a look, and could see the surprise in each other's eyes. This defense was really too frightening, wasn't it? Despite being barraged by thousands of attacks, it still did not budge in the slightest. Previously, Ling Han had been wondering why these insects were not cautious at all. Weren't they afraid that these attacks would destroy the insect queen as well? Their intelligence was indeed as low as rock bottom. But facts had proven that while it was true that the insect queen was not very mobile, the toughness of her outer shell had reached a chilling level. How were they supposed to kill it then? The mouth part, both exclaimed at the same time. To continuously lay eggs, it would definitely take a lot of energy as well. It would have to continuously eat. Then, they could penetrate its mouthpart and attack its mind directly, and they were sure that its internal organs couldn't be as hard as this. The two of them raced towards the mountain, but the troops of insects were attacking them like mad, and even those winged insects were spitting out arrows from a close distance in the air, with absolutely no regard for their own lives. This caused a very great problem for Ling Han and Hu Furong. I'll block them, you go. Hu Furong's expression was filled with killing intent. At this time, it was like she had turned into a demon. Boom, Frightening flames surged from her body, extending her limbs continuously. As she swept out a palm, the flames took the form of a dragon which swooped out. The insects were dying by the masses, falling from the mountain. In this instant, Hua Furong was fully showing her battle prowess that exceeded the line of the celestial king tier. Ling Han took a deep breath. Regulations of space activated, and he teleported towards the summit. Because he couldn't see too far, he did not dare teleport too far, either. Who knew what kind of hellish place he would crash into in a moment of carelessness? He continuously activated small-range teleportation, rushing rapidly towards the mountain. From afar, he could only see the rough shape. Now, he could see more and more details. This mountain was indeed unusual. It was not covered with mountain rocks, but was rather covered with the veins of an insect shell. Ling Han sent out a casual sword strike, and then looked astonished. Even with the sharpness of the divine demon sword, it just left behind a mark that was around half a foot deep in it, but not the slightest bit of blood dripped out. Who knew just how thick this outer shell had to be? That was right. The divine demon sword was completely capable of digging into the shell of this insect queen, but this needed time. The problem was, where would he get this time from? In the distance, though Hua Furong was still unleashing her might, impeding a great number of insects, a considerable number had still circled around and came over. Among them were 2 winged insects. These things released sneaky arrows, which could not be guarded against. Ling Han did not pause, and still charged towards the mountain as per the original plan. No matter what, this insect queen had to have a weakness. With his repeated teleportation, the summit was finally within sight. However, Ling Han immediately felt a strong sense of danger. 2 insects that he had never seen before had appeared soundlessly. Their size was very large, reaching 30 meters in length. They were like mantises, with 2 incredibly massive pincers. It was like they were 2 celestial tools, exuding a dim light. Though the light wasn't very strong, it was still very terrifying. Ling Han's heart clenched. This should be the last line of defense for the insect queen. Furthermore, there were very few of them. This meant that their strength would definitely be even more powerful. He did not waste his words at all. There was nothing he wanted to communicate with these insects. Wielding the sword, he charged out. The divine demon sword shone brilliantly, its sword chi soaring to the 9 heavens. The 2 giant insects used their pincers to shield themselves. Pu, pu, pu. When the sword chi landed, it left behind a very long mark on their pincers, but after the sword chi completed its course, these pincers were slowly recovering. Though it wasn't very fast, the wound left behind by the sword chi wasn't very deep, either, and they could still be recovered very soon. Ling Han had no intention to tarry any further with these 2 giant insects. With a leap, he directly charged over. Shua, shua, the 2 great insects opened their mouths at the same time, spitting out a dim light. It was extraordinarily fast, and caught up with him in an instant. Ling Han could only withdraw his sword and deliver a counter. When the divine demon sword landed, the dim light immediately exploded, turning into a terrifying shock wave. His figure trembled, and he was involuntarily sent flying outwards. At first, Ling Han had thought that the attacks of these 2 great insects were more inclined towards corrosion. He had not expected that they would be filled with explosive power, and had directly thrown him outwards. He hurriedly somersaulted a few times, tapping repeatedly with both feet as he charged back towards the mountain. The 2 great insects assailed him, brandishing their twin pincers, and countless insects were charging over beneath them. There were also winged insects that were launching sneak attacks from the air. The pressure was as heavy as a mountain. How was he supposed to get out of this crisis? Ling Han shouted loudly. Peng! The sound turned into a flood wave that barreled towards the 2 giant insects. The divine demon sword was twirling in circles, slicing through all the sneaky arrows fired from the winged insects. Now, he definitely could not be stopped. Otherwise, when the sea of insects flooded towards him, he would really be done for, and all of them would be finished as well. Thus, unless it encountered a crisis like just now, how could it possibly stop eating and laying eggs? Ling Han broke into a grin, and suddenly clenched his left hand tightly before throwing it forwards. Damn insect, You have still fallen for it. He threw out 7 tiny red dots. They were like 7 tiny red pills. Immediately, they were tossed into the air above the summit while the insect queen was absorbing energy. Its ability of absorption was shocking, and before it reacted in the slightest, those 7 tiny red pills had been sucked in. The insect queen was shocked, and released a spiritual wave. It did not know what it had eaten, but since it had been fed by Ling Han, they definitely could not be anything good. Ling Han broke into a grin, and declared, "Boom, pang." The whole mountain immediately shook wildly. Multiple veined patterns could be seen glowing, as if something was about to burst out. What had Ling Han tossed? The heaven and earth origin stars. This was a frighteningly deadly weapon that could kill even low-tier celestial kings. Even if the outer shell of this insect queen was extremely hard, if they exploded inside its body, no matter how strong it was, so what? Its insides would definitely be blasted into bits. However, it could not be denied that the insect queen's outer shell was indeed hard. The heaven and earth origin stars had already exploded, yet still could not blast out. All of it was ferociously exploding in the insect queen's body, which showed that if they were directly thrown, the most that could be done was only severe injury, or even causing light wounds to the insect queen. Killing it was a completely impossible feat. The whole mountain was shaking madly. This was the insect queen's body. The queen was directly sustaining the great blast of 7 heaven and earth origin stars in its body. Even if its defense was shocking, so what? Boom, the summit burst out with majestic flames like the eruption of a volcano. All the insects sank into a daze in the same instant. It was like they had also suddenly lost the pillar of support for their spirits and the reason for living with the death of the insect queen. But only a short while later, these insects went berserk. Some fled outside the cave, while others continued to attack Ling Han and the others madly. Some were even slaughtering and killing their companions. This was because they had lost the insect queen that would oversee and organize them. They were completely dazed, and felt that aside from themselves, everyone and everything else was an enemy. Fight, 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 kill, 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 everything was in chaos. Ling Han met back up with the others. They all sighed in relief. Though there was still poison accumulated in their bodies, they could slowly expel this poison as long as they were given enough time. Though there were still insects attacking them, this was already the end of it. They faced them calmly, filled with confidence. But right at this moment, a change suddenly occurred. Multiple whip-like objects suddenly extended out from different corners of the mountain walls, wrapping around these insects. Some were directly ensnared, and the insects were strangled to death, but there were some that had not ensnared their targets, and were locked in intense battle with the insects. What was going on here now? Yi, why does this look a bit like water vines? Ling Han suddenly asked. These whip-like objects were like vines in the first place. Everyone nodded, and a feeling of foreboding rose up in all of them. Since they had been forced onto this island, from the fruit fragrance of a celestial fruit that suddenly spread out to this sea of insects, all the events were seeping with strangeness, yet it seemed like they were closely linked to one another. This island had to be linked to the water vine in countless ways. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been forced here. And now, something similar had appeared, so it was inevitable that they would think that this was strange. The numbers of the sea of insects was still shocking, but their only path now was death, and their numbers could not be replenished. Hence, the rate of their decrease was actually quite fast. Mainly, it was that water vine that had ensnared too many things. Though a considerable number had also been killed by the insects, it was still the main force in the slaughter of the insects. I am sure that everyone must be feeling very confused. A voice suddenly rang out. A person had appeared in midair in the cave. He was a dashing young man in white robes who was very young. There were, actually, other people in this place. Alarm bells rang in everyone's hearts. This was definitely a trap. From the moment they had been forced onto the island, this was a trap. However, they could not tell what the purpose of this trap was even now. Ling Han raised his voice. Who are you? Are you planning to give us an explanation? Of course. The white-robed young man nodded and smiled, looking very amiable and kindly. If it was not for the sake of giving you guys an explanation, What need would there be for me to appear? Wouldn't it have been fine to wait until all of you were killed? Hehe, though you guys will still be dying afterwards. Chapter 2453, Hui. Chapter 2453, Hui. The truth had come out, and the true culprit had appeared. Ling Han laughed. Then, we will have to trouble you. It's no trouble. After all, you people have also solved a large problem for me. Moreover, you guys are also the harbingers of luck for my leaving this place. In thanks for all the contribution that you have made, it is natural that I should at least allow you to die enlightened, the white-robed man smilingly said. You are the one who's going to die. Hu Nyo humphed. It looked like everything had been this man's doing, which made her extremely angry. Yet the white-robed man was not angered in the slightest. Where do you guys want me to start? Tell us who you are first, Ji Wuming stated evenly. In his last life, Hu knew how many storms he had endured, and he had ultimately become an invincible celestial king. Thus, he naturally had his bearing. Even faced with a more dangerous situation, he would not feel the slightest bit of panic. The white-robed man smiled, and bowed towards them as he said, My name is Hui, and this is a name I have bestowed on myself. Everyone exchanged looks. What kind of damn name was that? It didn't even include a surname. Moreover, even if he did have a name and surname, who would know where had popped out from? Oh, actually, you guys have seen me long ago, Hui continued. Ling Han's eyes set on him fixedly. After a while, he said in surprise, This is not your real body, but a spirit form that you have manifested. Pa. Hui clapped his hands, his face bearing an expression of approval. In fact, he even gave him a thumbs up. This was not Hui's real form. In fact, it was extremely possible that he wasn't even human. Everyone exchanged looks, and a thought suddenly popped up in their minds. You are one of those water vines, they exclaimed at the same time. Aside from the water vines, they really had never seen anything else, unless he was an insect, but they could probably ignore this possibility. Hui laughed loudly. You have guessed the most part. However, I am not one of the water vines, but rather those are my roots. Gasp. Everyone was stunned. Just how long were the water vines? Everyone had a vague estimate. They could extend all the way from the depths of the ocean to the surface, so their length had to be astounding. Every single water vine actually could be considered a colossal creature, and now to say that these were all just Hui's roots. Then, just how gigantic did his real body have to be? In truth, Hui smiled, and cast an eye over all of their faces. Only then did he state slowly, Where you are all standing now is the inside of my real body. Boom, it was like countless heaven and earth origin stars had been dropped in their heads. The group was so stunned that they were dazed for a moment. Hang on. Ling Han said grimly, This island itself is your body. Hui clapped his hands. You have guessed correctly. It was I that have forced you people all the way into my main body. You guys can continue guessing. Why have I done so? Who knows why you are so insane? Bewitching Maiden Ru immediately quipped. Yet the Empress said, You wanted us to fight with these insects. There are really quite a number of smart people. Hui laughed loudly. These are parasites in my real body. Though my battle prowess is boundless, I am only a celestial herb, after all, so my powers are limited. Moreover, these parasites reproduce at an extremely fast rate, and after they become insects, their defense is extremely strong. Even I am helpless against them. Fortunately, you have helped me get rid of them. So tell me, how can I not be grateful to you? Hua Furong declared coldly, then spare the nonsense, and hand over 10 to 20 celestial fruits. Hui laughed loudly. It is useless, even I gave them to you. As you are people who are about to die, what need is there for me to waste my energy? Is this the way you express your gratitude to your benefactors? Ling Han asked. Hui shook his head. Firstly, this is a trap that I have laid, and I have not asked for your help in the first place. Secondly, the reason you people barged in was just for the celestial seed, and not because you wanted to help me of your own volition. Thirdly, your killing the insects was only to save yourselves as well. He paused, and then summarized, Thus, I do not owe you anything. However, I have always distinguished clearly between kindness and hatred. Thus, I wish to offer my thanks to you." Everyone was speechless. This guy was really shameless. Furthermore, he had elevated shamelessness to a glorious degree. In that case, no matter what words they said, it would be useless against him. As they spoke, the insects were dying by the masses. The initial sea of insects was presently only a scattered few by now, and even those powerful pincered insects were ensnared by countless whip-like shapes, torn forcefully into pieces. With the death of the insect queen, the whole sea of insects had lost their chief commander and the support for their follow-up forces. Death was already inevitable. Hui was even calmer. His strength was indeed shockingly powerful, and now with the internal problem resolved, it was natural that everything was within his grasp. "You guys still have a great use," Hui stated calmly. "I have decided to take human form and leave this place. However, due to the limits of the celestial path, I cannot leave, unless I can cheat the heavens. I need your blood essence. Not only can it help my life essence become even stronger, I will also be able to deceive this heaven and earth so that I can leave. Thus, allow me to thank you again." Hui bowed again. Though he spoke very politely, it only made Ling Han and the others even more furious. "Do you have that kind of power?" Dongfang Rui humphed coldly. He was the son of a heavenly venerate, and now someone actually said they were going to extract his blood essence. This celestial herb had to be completely ignorant, and did not know how terrifying a heavenly venerate could be. Otherwise, the moment he left the celestial path, he would be erased by the heavenly venerate. To actually dare make a move on the descendant of a heavenly venerate, wasn't that just courting death? Hui scoffed, and said, "Could it be that you guys have not witnessed my strength?" When his words fell, thousands of whip-like shapes immediately assailed. Every single whip-like shape was equivalent to an insect, and this number was also earth-shattering, in no way inferior to the sea of insects. Furthermore, they had already undergone a bloody battle, so how much battle prowess did they have left by now? Thankfully, Hui was just flexing his muscles, and did not truly attack them. At present, he was like an upstart that had just discovered a supreme treasure trove, so impatient to share his joy with others. Thus, even if Ling Han and the others would soon be killed by him, he was like a chatterbox. "A few epochs ago, I suddenly gained intelligence, and matured bit by bit." Hui narrated his tale. "It is really, really difficult for plants to succeed Tao. Even so, after so many years, my mentality has just barely matured. The essence of plants is beloved by the heaven and earth, but the moment they gain intelligence, they would be despised by the heaven and earth, causing parasites to emerge in my body, and I could get no peace. Thankfully, they are finally dealt with now." Hui revealed a menacing grin. "All right then. I have decided to kill all of you, and leave this godforsaken place. As for your reward, I will try my best to be quicker so that you will only have to suffer the least amount of pain possible." Everyone was grim. They would have to fight another tough battle. Yet Ling Han raised his right hand. "I still have 2 heaven and earth origin stars on me. This is what had killed the insect queen previously. Do you want to give them a try?" Everyone was immediately overjoyed. As it turned out, Ling Han had kept something back. "Good. Wonderful. Don't kill me. Don't hurt me," Hui exclaimed in a very exaggerated fashion, and even wrapped his arms around himself, shivering. However, he immediately broke into involuntary laughter. "I am really unsuited to acting." He crossed his arms behind his back. "Just make your move if you like. This can't kill me at all. At most, I will only suffer a slight injury. Today, your only path will be death," he said word by word. Chapter 2454 Negotiations. Chapter 2454 Negotiations. Hui was secure, knowing that he had backing. He was brimming with confidence. He was determined to get all of their blood. Why did he only choose monarch stars? Not only was it because they had powerful battle prowess and could withstand the sea of insects, it was also because only their blood would be effective for him, and could help him deceive the heaven and earth so he could leave this place. Thus, he did not hesitate even if he would risk being severely injured by the heaven and earth origin stars. This was something that could be slowly healed from, but if he missed this opportunity, Just when would he have another chance when there would be so many monarch stars gathered together? Then let's battle, Hu Furong declared coldly. If they were to battle outside, their chances of victory would actually be even lower. The water vines would only have to damage their ship, and just allow the ocean to deal with them. If they battled here, they would still have some hope. After all, this was inside Hui's body, his battle prowess would definitely be affected. Ling Han sighed, and took out the dimension scroll. Hui, you had better not force me. Oh! Hui looked towards Ling Han, a sliver of fury flickering in his eyes. Ling Han actually dared call him Hui one? So what if I force you? Hui asked, appearing very disdainful. Ling Han broke into a grin. With a thought, he activated Wally's model. Instantly, he began to extract the energy inside the dimension scroll. Wang, his body glowed, and a frightening power surged out, presently erasing the poison in his body at a rapid rate. One was the most fundamental void particle energy of the Genesis world, while the other was the poison of parasites in the body of some celestial herb on the celestial path. Just how wide was the gap between their levels? Countless times over. Hence, when this energy surged out, the poison in his body rapidly melted like snow that was met with blazing fire. Quang, a sudden clap of thunder rang out, but did not appear above the cave. Instead, it was at a more distant location. Hui immediately paled in shock. Others might not be able to see it, but it was very clear to him. Dense clouds were spreading out above his body, with lightning flashing and blazing. A terrifying heavenly tribulation was presently building up. Just what level had this tribulation attained? He only had a feeling that if he was struck even once, he would definitely be done for. But he hadn't broken through to the next cultivation level, nor had he done anything that would anger the heaven and earth, so how could there possibly be a heavenly tribulation targeting him? No, it was not targeting him, it was targeting Ling Han. Just because Ling Han was inside his body, the moment he experienced the heavenly tribulation, the latter would think that Hui was covering for Ling Han, and what was the consequence of interfering in a heavenly tribulation? Being struck by lightning as well. He was going to be forced to undergo the tribulation. Stop now. Hui quickly called out loudly. If this heavenly tribulation really formed, then everyone here would die, and he would be no exception, either. Ling Han naturally couldn't possibly allow a heavenly venerate tribulation to really form. He stopped extracting the energy inside the dimension scroll and smiled calmly. Now, I think we have the need to negotiate, right? Hui was speechless. After a while, he asked, what do you want? Ling Han smiled calmly. First, you have to ferry us across the great ocean. And then? Hui asked. Secondly, you have to let us go, of course. Hui immediately refused. I can only let you go alone, at most. He needed the blood of these monarch stars. Otherwise, he would have no way to change himself and leave the celestial path. In his eyes, this was a cage, imprisoning him forever in here. Ling Han shook his head. No, you can only detain these two people at most. He pointed at Dongfang Rui and Xian Rong. They were the descendants of the Jiuwu Heavenly Venerate and Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. He couldn't be bothered to care about their lives. Dongfang Rui and Xian Rong were both enraged. Fuck, you are really too underhanded, aren't you? But they did not flip out. Instead, they chose to follow Ling Han and the others all the way through. In this way, they would be able to escape together. No, at least 5. Hui shook his head. 5 was the lowest limit. If there were less than 5, there would be no way he could modify himself. Ling Han shook his head. Aside from Dongfang Rui and Xian Rong, the others were not so evil that he could use them as sacrifices. He once again extracted the energy inside the dimension scroll, and caused the thunderclouds to roll out, increasing his persuasiveness. Yet Hui had firmed his resolve. I have already lived long enough, and have no wish to stay trapped in this damn place any longer. Thus, if I cannot leave this place, there is no difference whether I live or die. Really? Ling Han could not confirm it. Logically, Hui had just dealt with the disaster in his body, and should be presently looking forward very much to a wonderful life ahead of him. However, in the process of a herb spirit ascending Tao, who knew if they had had their brains burnt out as well. He continued to absorb the energy inside the dimension scroll, and in the instant right before the heavenly tribulation arrived, he stopped. Hui did not speak, and was using this means to express his determination, his resolve in leaving this place. He had to have predicted that Ling Han had no wish to die, either, and that was why he had the confidence to be so firm. However, this had really hit Ling Han's sore spot. Ling Han thought for a while, and then said, "You only need blood essence. It is not a must that you want our lives. Hence, we can all surrender some blood essence to you so you can achieve your goal." Hui was silent, and nodded after a while. "All right." Ling Han looked towards the rest, and when he saw them nodding as well, he nodded, and said, "We have reached an agreement on the second condition. Now, the third, and final, condition." "Speak," Hui said. His expression was very livid. In his mind, he should have been able to overwhelm all of them, yet now was forced into negotiations, which made him feel very gloomy. It should be known he had played with them in the palm of his hand previously, so naturally he felt an indescribable feeling of superiority. Yet now, this sense of superiority had been shattered, and this was a very large gap. Ling Han said, "I need celestial fruits as well." He did not say we, because this was what he had earned through his own strength. There was no need for him to share with others. "How many?" Hui asked after a moment of silence. These celestial fruits were what he had nurtured himself originally, and were of no use to him at all. However, now that he had already ascended Tao, giving out celestial fruits would be equivalent to wounding his own vitality. Naturally, he was not very willing. Ling Han thought for a while. 20. Hui almost broke out into curses. "These are celestial fruits. Do you think they are cabbages? And you actually want 20? 20 your sister." "1, he declared coldly. "That's too few." Ling Han shook his head. "More." 2, Hui said after a pause. "Some more." It was like Ling Han and Hui had become businessmen. One was calling out exorbitant prices, while the other was not willing to budge a single bit. After haggling for a long while, they finally settled on a deal 7. 1 for her, 1 for him, 1 for her. Ling Han pointed at Hu Niu, the Rain Emperor, and the others. He took one of the 7 celestial fruits for himself, while the rest were given to Hu Niu, the Empress, Bewitching Maiden Ru, the Rain Emperor, Ji Wuming, and Hua Furong, respectively. He had given one to Ji Wuming because Ling Han hoped that the former could be stronger and catch up with him, and in the case of Hua Furong, it actually was due to the same reason as well. However, Hua Furong was incredibly strong on her own, with an astonishingly high evolution index. Both Dongfang Rui and Xian Rong were very envious, but how could it be that they would ask for celestial fruits from Ling Han? "All right, take us to the coast." Hui did not say a single word. He turned and left, his figure disappearing like foam. Though he could still leave the celestial path, according to the agreement, the process was bumpy and rocky. It had not been as smooth as he had imagined, which made him very displeased. 7 months later, Hui appeared again, and said, "We've reached the coast." They left, and with Hui leading the way, the labyrinth was naturally no issue. Very quickly, they arrived at the cave entrance from before. After walking out, they could see the bright crimson sun hanging in the skies, which lightened their spirits as well. Chapter 2455, Splitting Up. Chapter 2455, Splitting Up. "Hand over the blood essence to me." A sliver of divine sense from Hui took human form, and appeared at the cave entrance. Ling Han looked towards the distance. An expansive mainland appeared ahead of them. They had indeed arrived near the coast. Ling Han smiled slightly, yet shook his head. "We have to reach the coast first." Hui was displeased. "I have already fulfilled your conditions. Could it be that you don't think that you should show some of your sincerity? As long as we are in this massive ocean, you would have an advantage. In the first place, our agreement is not between equals," Ling Han said. "With how strong you are, even if we are on land, you are close to being invincible, so why should you be so concerned?" Hui humphed. In terms of genuine strength, even if they all joined forces, they would not be a match for him. This was because he had absolutely not revealed any of his weaknesses. Ling Han and the others could not truly cause him any serious injury. At most, they could only slice off a few of his roots, and this was practically just an itch to him. You people had best not have other ideas, or I will definitely not be so nice. Fine, fine, fine. Ling Han nodded casually. Hui ferried them to the beach, and Ling Han and the others hurriedly jumped onto the beach. Instantly, their hearts calmed. With their feet on solid ground, their battle prowess finally could be unleashed to pinnacle level, and throughout these 4 months, they had naturally expelled the insect poison completely as well, returning to their prime condition. Blood essence, Hui demanded. Ling Han nodded, and was the first to stretch out his right hand. Stimulated with force, the tip of his finger glowed. Then, with a slice of the divine demon sword, a drop of blood shining with an unusual glimmer appeared. Da, da, da. He bled out 10 drops of blood in total, and they were contained in a jade bottle. This was blood essence. Even if he only had to give up 10 drops, it still had serious effects on Ling Han, causing his expression to become very ugly. Thankfully, with his amazing body art, it would also be very fast for him to recover his blood essence. Hua Furong and the others also cut their wrists to let out some blood. They all gave up 10 drops. Blood essence was too valuable, so it naturally could only be given out in drops. Hui glanced them over, and said, "I'm still missing a bit more." This was just barely enough for him, but it was not assured. Ling Han asked, "How much more do you need?" "At least another 20 drops. Hui was not reserved either. Ling Han looked towards Dongfang Rui and Shen Rong. "You guys let out some more blood." The both of them were immediately outraged. "Why does it have to be us?" "That's right. There are 10 of us, so it would be fine if each of us just gives out another 1 or 2 drops. Bewitching Maiden Ru was not a monarch star, so even if she requested to surrender some of her own blood of her own volition, Hui would not take it, either. It was of no use to him. Ling Han tossed them a glare. "I told you to let out some blood, so just do as I say. Why are you two spouting so much nonsense? Why don't you guys ask yourselves what you have done? Now I'm just telling you to let out some blood, and you're so noisy about it." "No." Both of them shook their heads. Ling Han moved. Boom, with battle prowess and power of regulation surging at the same time, his battle prowess leaped past the line of Celestial King tier all at once as he suppressed both Dongfang Rui and Shen Rong. Damn it. The two of them hurriedly entered into Heaven Forbidden state, and began clashing with Ling Han. Unfortunately, even if they had entered into this state, it only allowed their vitality index to be extremely close to the Celestial King tier, and while using celestial techniques further would indeed possibly push their battle prowess past the line of Celestial King tier, it was still slightly inferior compared with Ling Han. The result was that they were still only beaten into continuous retreat by Ling Han even when the two of them joined forces. In just 100 moves, Ling Han suppressed the both of them. He held the divine demon's sword at their necks, forcing them to surrender their blood essence. There was naturally no way that Ji Wuming would help them, and Hua Furong acted as if she had seen nothing. Who could stop Ling Han? Dongfang Rui and Shen Rong could only force out another few drops of blood essence, but they were both only willing to surrender 5 drops. Otherwise, they would rather choose to directly break through to the Celestial King tier. If they lost too much blood essence, their battle prowess would drop greatly, and they would definitely be unable to obtain the perfect celestial seed at the end. Since that was the case, what need was there for them to accept a compromise? "I only have so much." Ling Han tossed the 2 jade bottles over to Hui. Actually, the blood essence from before was barely enough for his use. Hence, after Hui took the jade bottles, he nodded, and did not push them any further. "Then, we will take our leave," Ling Han said. Hui's figure trembled, and disappeared from sight. This was only a sliver of his divine sense. However, soon after, waves rose up in the ocean, as countless water vines shot up into the skies, creating extremely terrifying tsunami waves that were thousands of meters tall. Everyone showed hints of alert in their expression. Was Hui going to become hostile? Boom, the ocean waves split apart, and an astonishingly massive island rose up in the ocean. However, after the island rose up thousands of meters, they could see countless water vines beneath it, intertwined tightly together. This was Hui's real body. Looks like a carrot, Ling Han muttered. It really looked like a carrot, just that it was countless times much larger. No meat, not delicious. Hunyo said with a yawn. Losing 10 drops of blood essence made her feel very weary. Xiao, this giant carrot released a blurry light that wrapped around it entirely. Then, suddenly, the light dazzled brilliantly, causing their vision to blur. Was he going to attack? Everyone stayed on the alert, but when the light dimmed, a person appeared in front of them. It was still Hui. What was he playing at? Yet Ling Han's eyes narrowed. You actually can take on human form already. The human Hui from before was only a sliver of divine sense, but now his real body had taken human form. The significance was completely different. If the present Hui was killed, he really would die. Everyone couldn't help but feel keen. If they could kill such a celestial herb that had gained intelligence and ascended Tao, just how much amazing profit would they be able to gain? Hui humphed and spread open his right hand. Multiple water vines appeared, densely intertwined in an extremely exaggerated manner. Everyone immediately dismissed the thought of attacking. Though he had taken human form, Hui's strength was still terrifying. What is it? You want to accompany us further? Ling Han asked smilingly. I, too, want a flawless celestial seed, Hui declared darkly. Fuck, you yourself are a celestial seed, so what do you want it for? Ling Han exclaimed exaggeratedly. Hui humphed. Then you guys also have celestial seeds in your bodies, so why do you still desire a flawless celestial seed? This was quite logical, and rendered everyone speechless. Still, a celestial herb that should be supplying celestial seeds actually wanted to contend with them over celestial seeds. No matter how they thought about it, it was rather strange. Then, we will use our respective powers, and depend on our own luck respectively, Hua Furong said coldly. Just think, she was known as the #1 celestial maiden in the eras, yet she had actually been tricked by a herb, and almost died, which made her very furious. However, her disadvantage lay in the fact that she had not broken through the barrier to the celestial king tier. Once she set foot into this threshold, her battle prowess would be incredibly powerful. This revenge would definitely be exacted. Xiao, her figure rose, and she was the first to leave. Dongfang Rui and Xian Rong were also looking at Ling Han venomously. They would remember the humiliation that they had suffered. Once they became celestial kings, they would definitely seek Ling Han out and get their revenge. Ling Han scoffed, and demanded coldly, "What are you two looking at?" The two of them did not refute him. Instead, they turned and left. At present, all of them could break through to the celestial king tier, which meant that they had grasp of a very powerful trump card. Every single one of them was secure, knowing that they had backing. Ji Wuming also left gracefully, and did not bring along his intergenerational disciple. Shi Chanzi, however, left with Jiolan, who knew if some relation surpassing friendship had occurred between the two of them. "Fourth brother, we will also move separately," the Rain Emperor said. "Sure," Ling Han said with a nod. The team of 11 immediately split up, and once more only Ling Han and his group was left, along with the addition of Hui. Chapter 2456, Summoning Cloud City. Chapter 2456, Summoning Cloud City. This was a big boss. Hui was expressionless, as cold as ice. Ling Han smiled. There were so many of them, so why must you follow me? Hui glanced at him emotionlessly. You are a very intriguing person. You are the first person to successfully threaten me. Furthermore, I am very curious about the reason why you can use such great power. You want to know? Fine, I'll tell you. Ling Han generously took out Worley's model theory, and even provided the detailed formula. In any case, there was no one that could learn it at present aside from him. True enough, Hui was extremely dazed. At the beginning, he was still pondering, but very soon, he collapsed, and turned into his real form of a giant carrot, endless roots waving around. Let's go. Ling Han pulled the 3 women with him, and escaped quickly. He had no wish to stay with a terrifying guy like Hui. Though the latter had not advanced into the celestial king tier, either otherwise, Why would he need a flawless celestial seed? This guy was really terrifying with his special form under specific conditions. It was best to keep their distance. The four of them set out, and continued their quest for celestial seeds. Their final destination was naturally the heart of the celestial path. Only after becoming a celestial king would they be able to directly leave from there. This mainland after their marine trip was extremely dangerous, with various poisonous swamps, valleys filled with sword chi, and mountains with soaring saber intent. Every location could not be barged in rashly, or the only result would be death. They had probably reached the level of second heaven, or even third heaven celestial king tier. 4 pseudo-celestial kings like them, they were all places of danger, death and demise. However, it was not that those danger zones could not traversed through. That would have to depend on the date. Perhaps there were just a few hours in a whole month when they would be safe, and one could pass through. Perhaps it would be alternate days. The time was extremely short. Ling Han and the others naturally slowed down. There were some danger zones that would only have a change once every few years. They had to be extremely patient. At times, they had to stay for a longer time. Otherwise, if any unexpected changes took place, it would be too late for regret. This was not them being too cautious, but rather that they had encountered this situation before. They had clearly seen a change take place in their environment, and it could be traversed, but it only lasted for 1 or 2 breaths at most before returning back to being extremely frightening, with killing intent around every corner. Though this kind of falsely safe situation did not appear too frequently, it just needed to happen once, and they would have to take careful notice because no one could guarantee the danger zone that they were about to pass through was not in a state of false safety. In this fashion, their progress naturally became overwhelmingly slow. Over 1,000 years had passed, and they were still very far away from the heart of the celestial path. No wonder the celestial path would be open for as long as 10,000 years. If they had to walk all the way to the heart, the time taken was indeed very long. Ling Han and the others had naturally grasped the celestial seed marks that Hui had bestowed on them, allowing them to grasp slightly Hui's Tao. It was more inclined towards slaughter, and was also close to death, which was very bizarre. And it was also because of this that they had spent a good few centuries before finally grasping this celestial seed mark. However, none of them wanted to use this as their own celestial seed, even if the overall level of this celestial seed was higher. If they used it to break through to the celestial king tier, their whole person would become a killing machine, cold and emotionless. It could only be used for reference. The 4 were also continuously absorbing celestial seeds, comprehending them one after another, and extracting the essence within to increase their own understanding of Tao. Ling Han had told the 3 women before that he had had great ambitions. He would take the strengths of thousands of celestial seeds, and form a celestial seed that belonged uniquely to him alone. He did not want any celestial seed that already existed, because in his eyes, any celestial seed that already existed would naturally bear the mark of another, even if this other was actually the heaven and earth. His own Tao should be unique and solely his. The Empress and Hu Niu both decided to do the same. They would collect all kinds of celestial seeds and gather their strength together to form a celestial seed that suited them the most. Bewitching maiden Ru did not have such grand ambitions. Now, she would already have no regrets if she could break through to the celestial king tier. The more celestial seed marks there were, the deeper Ling Han's appreciation became. It was like the heaven and earth had also appeared in front of him in the form of these marks. He would be able to grasp regulations with a simple movement, and nothing was impossible for him. This kind of feeling was very amazing, making him gain an urge to hurriedly break through to the celestial king tier. He hurriedly repressed this kind of urge. If he broke through now, it would not be perfect enough. The 4 of them continued on their way. Sometimes, they would not be walking in a straight line, but would rather detour to other places. As long as there was a celestial seed, they would make their move. This was their purpose in coming to the celestial path. The number of celestial king pills in Ling Han's possession increased further and further. Not only was there one for each of his wives and parents, even his friends could each have claim to one. This was something they could not have imagined before they set out, that things would actually progress so smoothly. Time sped by swiftly. Another 7,000 years passed, and only less than 2,000 years were left until the deadline of 10,000 years. Ling Han and the others made some adjustments, and did not roam any further. Instead, they headed directly for the central area of the celestial path. They could not possibly make the cut-off period with too little time to spare, or they could really be trapped here for eternity. The celestial fruits Ling Han had obtained numbered in the hundreds. The mark that each of them had formed appeared in his mind. He had a kind of feeling that even if it was that so-called flawless celestial seed, so what? He had not intended to break through with that celestial seed, either. At most, he would only study it. In fact, he had a feeling that even if he broke through now, the celestial seed he formed would not be inferior to a flawless celestial seed. Of course, with no immediate reason, he was in no rush to break through, either. The Empress and bewitching maiden Ru Wan were slightly inferior. They still had to accumulate some more. On this day, they arrived in a city, and made some queries to find out just how far they were from the heart of the celestial path. This city was called Summoning Cloud City, and had a celestial king as overseer. Naturally, the celestial king was named Summoning Cloud's Celestial King. This city had been named after his title in the first place. The Summoning Cloud's Celestial King was very powerful. He was a third heaven celestial king, and could definitely be considered a supreme elite on the celestial path. However, it was rumored that this celestial king was presently not within the city, but no one knew where exactly he had gone, nor did anyone dare to ask. In any case, no one dared to cause trouble. Otherwise, if a celestial king was truly enraged, wouldn't that just be seeking death? Ling Han and the others entered into the city to find out the details of their present situation. Do you guys know where Lord Summoning Clouds has gone? In the restaurant, there were people constantly discussing spiritedly, passing judgment on everything. At times, they really would reveal some real secrets. How could we possibly know? That's right. Wherever Lord Summoning Clouds has gone, how could it be that he would have to tell us first? The customer from before laughed loudly. Let me tell you guys. I have a relative that is the son of a distant third uncle of the youngest disciple of the Summoning Clouds Celestial King. He has told me himself that Lord Summoning Clouds has gone to fight a war. What? Lord Summoning Clouds is already so strong, and there is still someone that dares to become his enemy? Someone asked disbelievingly. That's right. You must be grandstanding. This is completely unbelievable. The customer from before spoke with an assured tone as he patted his chest and declared, I can swear on my life that every word I say is true. Then tell us, whom has Lord Summoning Clouds gone to war with? I do not know. The customer from before shook his head. TSK. Everyone shook their heads. This could not hold up to questioning at all. Immediately, the cat was let out of the bag. It's true, the customer from before hurriedly exclaimed. Though I do not know whom Lord Summoning Clouds has gone to war with, it is rumored that Lord Chiyuan has muttered this before. It involves the method to leave the celestial path. Chapter 2457, Redeeming the Hostage. Chapter 2457, Redeeming the Hostage. Ling Han was intrigued now, and pricked up his ears to listen. However, the others were completely uninterested, and scoffed. To ordinary people like them, this city was more or less their everything. At most, the farthest they had gone would be several hundred kilometers out of the city. Furthermore, there was no way they could become celestial kings, either. Staying on the celestial path or being in the celestial realm had completely no difference for them. When the customer from before saw this, he couldn't help but wilt. At first, he thought that he had a great secret, something that he could boast about for a few years. Meanwhile, Ling Han thought back to when they had just entered the celestial path. It was said that the celestial kings here would try to be as near to the heart of the celestial path as possible, and that was to contend for the treasure trove lying within. Now that he thought about it again, what if this so-called treasure trove was actually the chance to leave the celestial path? Even Hui had thought of the idea to deceive the heavens, and wanted to leave this place. There was no reason that great and mighty celestial kings would resign themselves to being eternally trapped here. For ordinary people, the celestial path was incredibly massive, but for celestial kings, it was just a slightly bigger prison. Ling Han frowned slightly. What he was concerned about now was if this opportunity that these celestial kings were contending over just happened to come into conflict with that flawless celestial seed. Coming out of the restaurant, he asked around again, and found out that Summoning Cloud City was already very close to the heart of the celestial path. Going by the speed of an ascending origin tier, it was only about a 300-year journey. For pseudo-celestial kings like them, the time would definitely be much shorter than that. However, it was not so easy to enter into the heart of the celestial path. There were powerful immortal beasts standing guard, and even the celestial kings would not dare to rashly set foot there. They were very wary about going there. Ling Han and the others exited the city. Right when they arrived at the city gates, they saw someone attaching notices on the wall. At first, Ling Han did not pay any attention, but when he swept an eye over, a hint of surprise appeared in his expression. This was an arrest warrant, and a person's face was drawn there. If some abominable, evil criminal was really being listed as wanted, Ling Han would forget about it after a single glance, but the problem here was that he recognized this face. Yang Xianlu. Could it be that this guy had made an enemy of the Summoning Cloud Celestial King? But the Summoning Cloud Celestial King had already left, so who could be able to apprehend Yang Xianlu? He was a monarch tier, and had reached the peak stage of the ascending origin tier. Without being a celestial king, who could suppress him? Ling Han looked towards that notice, and couldn't help but look angered. It was written there that Yang Xianlu had fallen into someone's hands, and Ling Han was to head to a certain location to redeem him. He was given the time limit of 100 years, and 70 years had already passed since this deadline was given. Ling Han captured the person who was sticking out the notices. It was just a minor character that had just advanced into the heavenly body tier. He said that someone had given him a star stone to stick these notices everywhere in the city. Where is that person? Ling Han asked. He knew that this guy was just a minor character, and wouldn't know anything at all. In the Fortunate Clouds Inn, feeling Ling Han's killing intent, the minor character shivered in fear. Ling Han nodded, and when he found out where Fortunate Clouds Inn was, he directly charged over. The three women were also furious. To actually dare to capture Ling Han's friend and use him as a threat against him, who would dare be so outrageously bold? However, since he had the intention to target Ling Han, it should be impossible that he did not know how strong Ling Han was. There had to be a terrifying trap laid out in wait for Ling Han. They soon arrived at the Fortunate Clouds Inn. Ling Han headed directly for one of the rooms, and knocked on the door. Who is it? Very soon, someone opened the doors. A middle-aged man walked out, directing a confused look at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. Don't you know me? Who are you? The middle-aged man asked, his gaze filled with alertness. This person's cultivation level was only at the severing mundane tier as well, being pitifully weak. Ling Han frowned. It looked like this was also just an errand boy. He pushed open the doors and entered. That person couldn't stop him at all, but when he saw the Empress and the other women behind Ling Han, he couldn't help but stare. Instantly, he was rendered speechless. Ling Han sat down very casually. Who told you to stick those notices? The middle-aged man was surprised, and hurriedly replied, My lord, this has nothing to do with me. A lord told me to do this. He is very powerful, and I have no choice but to obey him. This person said that Summoning Cloud City was not the first place that he had gone to, but rather the third. Merely the journey itself had taken over a decade's time. If it were not for the fact that the person who had commanded him to do this had also provided a carriage for him, the time he had spent would only have been even longer. Ling Han paused. The true culprit told this person to spread the news of Yang Xianlu being captured everywhere, so it was probable the middle-aged man was not the only one that was hired. That was why he could stick notices in various cities, and increase the chances of Ling Han finding out. The person who has commanded you, do you remember what he looks like? Ling Han asked. A section of my memories has been erased. I am not sure at all, the middle-aged man said, slightly anxious, as if he feared that Ling Han would directly take his life in displeasure. Ling Han sneered. The true culprit actually feared that he would find out who he really was. Who exactly could it be? What do you plan to do? The Empress asked. Naturally, I will keep the appointment, Ling Han said. Firstly, Yang Xianlu was his subordinate, and had always been executing his commands. Though there was change in the present situation, and it was practically impossible that their alliance would come into play, their friendship was still there. Secondly, Ling Han also wanted to know who was targeting him. There are many who want to kill me, but there are not many that have the strength to do so, Ling Han thought out loud. There should not be anyone in the ascending origin tier that can touch me. Thus, the other must have broken through on the celestial path, and is compelling me to appear so he can take this opportunity when I have not become a celestial king yet to get rid of me. However, there seem to be quite a number of such ascending origin tiers as well, the Empress said in reminder. There were indeed quite a number. There should be a great many celestial kings that wanted to curry the favor with the two great heavenly venerates, Jowu Heavenly Venerate and Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable, so it was nothing strange that they would tell their disciples to snipe Ling Han on the celestial path. By now, more than 8,000 years had passed, and those that should become celestial kings would naturally more or less have broken through, so they had begun to lay out traps for Ling Han. On the other hand, only those with great ambition would not have broken through yet. Their goal was naturally the last flawless celestial seed. This would influence whether they would be able to become heavenly venerates or not. Looks like the other party seems to be quite confident, Ling Han said. To attach notices so boldly and publicly was more or less an announcement to the world. If Ling Han could easily save the hostage, what face would his opponent have left? What do you plan on doing? The Empress asked. Kill him. Hunyo called out from the sidelines. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, this time, I will go alone. All of you will wait outside for me. If it is just me alone, I can easily retreat or advance. However, you guys have to be careful as well. This may just be a trap, yet the main targets could be you guys. The Empress and the others nodded. Bewitching Maiden Ru said, if we really encounter danger, I will break through immediately. She was a monarch tier. Once she broke through to the Celestial King tier, she would definitely be one of the more powerful among newly advanced Celestial Kings. Only a monarch star would be able to suppress her. All right. Let's set out first, and we will act separately when we are almost there. They left Summoning Cloud City. Previously, they had already found out where Yang Xianlu was being held hostage. Hence, they were directly heading towards the destination. The location was actually very distant. Even they at their current level had traveled for over 2 months before finally drawing near to the location. The place where Ling Han was to go to redeem the hostage was a canyon. Its name was Tiger Caging Canyon, and he knew just from the name itself that this place had to be extremely dangerous. Chapter 2458, Tiger Caging Canyon. Chapter 2458, Tiger Caging Canyon. The Tiger Caging Canyon was a narrow canyon. The cliff walls on either side were thousands of meters tall. They were tall, steep, and thin, as if two sharp blades. Looking from afar, the cliff walls were enshrouded in a black fog, and looked like a haunted mountain. All right, you guys find somewhere to hide, Ling Han said. The Empress and the other women left together, while Ling Han took a deep breath, and strode towards the Tiger Caging Canyon. He was very curious about who exactly was behind this scheme. Dongfang Rui? Shen Rong? Yu Wudi? Or was it some other random character? Ling Han did not hide his movements, and simply strode towards the canyon boldly like that. However, his energy was already adjusted to its prime condition. He could unleash the most powerful blow at any moment. A while later, he arrived at the entrance of the canyon. From this angle, the whole canyon was like a monster that was opening its eerie, dark giant mouth, planning to swallow and devour him. The terrain here was dangerous, with cliffs on either side. The canyon was long and narrow, no wider than 9 meters. This was a place very suitable for an ambush. Ling Han held out a hand, clenched it into a fist, and delivered a punch at the cliff. Peng! A deep sound rang out from the cliff wall. Bits of rock fell off, but the mountain itself was not damaged in the slightest. Very firm. Ling Han appeared slightly surprised. Though he had not used his full power in this punch, the power of this blow was not weak, either, Yet it actually hadn't damaged the mountain in the slightest, which showed just how tough this mountain was. No wonder they had laid a trap for him here. It was clear that he was to have no way of retreat. With both ends sealed off, plus sealing off any aerial escape, there was no need for too many people, and he would be an easy target. Of course, the prerequisite was that all of them had to reach or even surpass Ling Han's strength. Otherwise, it would be Ling Han that would be getting rid of them in a single stroke. Still, has Yang Xianlu really been captured? Ling Han pondered deeply. With Yang Xianlu's strength as a monarch tier, even if he hadn't obtained a complete celestial seed after so many years, he should have fused a complete one from the celestial seed shards that he had obtained. In that case, when he was attacked, he would have a life-saving card left to play breaking through to the Celestial King tier. Once he became a Celestial King, even if there was a gap in strength, there would be really no way to stop him from leaving if he wanted to, unless the gap in cultivation level was too wide, such as a fourth heaven against a first heaven Celestial King. Thus, it was very easy for Celestial Kings to determine who was stronger, but to kill a Celestial King was difficult. The strongest Celestial King on the Celestial Path was only at the third heaven, and this kind of Celestial King had no grudges against Ling Han, so how could they make use of Yang Xianlu to lay out a trap for him? As Ling Han walked, a smile appeared at the corners of his lips as he thought, "Am I a little foolish? I clearly know that the whole thing is a trap, yet still jump inside of my own volition." He was very displeased that someone would target him in secret and launch sneak attacks against him, but the other party would definitely appear this time. He just wanted to see who exactly was behind all this. If Ling Han had the chance, he would kill this damn insect. It was always displeasing to have someone target him from behind. He strode in. He naturally had his own reasons for daring to be so confident. The tiger caging canyon was eerie. There were no sounds of birds, nor the growls of wild animals. This place was as silent as a den of ghosts. After walking some ways, he discovered a wooden pillar erected ahead of him. It was as tall as 30 meters, and a rope hung down from the very top. A person was presently hanging on this rope. This person was disheveled. The most Ling Han could tell was that this person had to be a man, but the exact details of his appearance could not be distinguished. "Yang Xianlu?" Ling Han called out loudly, "Brother Yang, Brother Yang." The person's limbs drooped lifelessly, his head hanging down on his chest. There was not the slightest movement. It was unknown whether he was unconscious from severe injury or already dead. Ling Han walked to the foot of the wooden pillar, raised his head, and called out, "Brother Yang, I have come to save you." "Xiao," he suddenly waved out a hand, and a cold light shot out, flying rapidly towards Yang Xianlu. This was the divine demon sword, but the target that the tip of the blade was pointed at was not the rope above that person. It aimed directly at his mind. This strike was astonishingly quick as Ling Han had used the regulations of space on it, and added with the special ability of the divine demon sword itself, it directly pierced through space, reaching that person's forehead. Wang, right at this moment, the dying person immediately came back to life. He exuded a shocking aura. It was at the Celestial King tier, capable of shaking stars down from the skies. However, Ling Han's battle prowess was comparable to a Celestial King's, and added with how body art would burst out faster, while the divine demon sword was more powerful than the average celestial tool, and had gained a special ability, Ling Han was faster. Besides, that Celestial King had previously withheld his aura completely, pretending to be a dying man. Though he had shown his might now, there was still a process necessary to create that burst of power. Could he make it in time? Pu. The divine demon sword directly penetrated through the forehead of that Celestial King, and only stopped when the hilt of the sword was stopped by his skull. Instantly, a shower of blood started raining down as the heaven and earth grieved for the death of a Celestial King. To be frank, this Celestial King had really died too uselessly. He had not even made a single move. In fact, he had not even shown his face before he was insta-killed. This was practically a great humiliation. Ling Han stretched out a hand. Xiao, the divine demon sword immediately flew back towards him, and fell once more into his grasp. "Hehe, I have already said that this villain was extremely wily. See, our plot couldn't succeed, and the force on our side has decreased instead," someone said with a sneer. Though it seemed like a self-reflection, there was absolutely no sorrow felt for the death of that celestial king. It was like they were complete strangers. Ling Han raised a brow. "Yu Wudi. That's right. It is me." Yu Wudi walked down slowly from above the canyon, his arms crossed behind his back. He had completely stabilized his celestial king tier cultivation level by now, and the streak of light around him was extremely dazzling. He exuded the unique pressure that belonged to a celestial king, which would make others hold their breaths and shiver. Ling Han nodded. "I was just thinking who could be so shameless and lay this kind of trap, and you definitely were one of them." Yu Wudi was not angered in the slightest. He had already experienced Ling Han's sharp tongue before, and naturally knew that he could not debate with Ling Han, or he would definitely experience a loss. He smiled faintly. "These are your last words." Ling Han set his eyes on him. "Not bad, there is improvement in your strength. Unfortunately, it is still very weak." Yu Wudi's hands trembled involuntarily, his eyes spitting out blades of ice. If it were not due to Ling Han, why would he have had to break through so early? If it were not due to Ling Han hindering him, he could have rushed all the way to the height of the middle stage of the first heaven at least. By then, his battle prowess would have reached the middle stage of the second heaven. But now, though he had stabilized his cultivation at the celestial king tier, his battle prowess had just reached the pinnacle of the first heaven. This was extremely inconsistent with his aptitude as a monarch star. Feeling Ling Han touch his sore spot, Yu Wudi was naturally very resentful. "Your good luck ends here. Next, I will make you pay a terrible price, and regret having been born in this world," Yu Wudi declared menacingly. "Your words are eloquent but untruthful." Ling Han waved a hand dismissively. "Whatever tricks you have up your sleeve, just go ahead. With just you, there is still no way to kill me." Ling Han was equivalent to a celestial king himself. For a celestial king to kill another celestial king, how could it be done without being 3 heavens higher in cultivation? Ling Han was not stupid, and would not retreat and battle to death even while knowing that this was a deadly battle. "I have already said that there is no need for so much trouble. Once this brat entered the canyon, we should have immediately ganged up on him." Another voice rang out. A second celestial king appeared. A streak of color entwined around him, his aura shocking. Ling Han looked over, and couldn't help but grin. "So it is you. What is it? You have fled previously, and now why do you dare to return?" Previously, the Blue North Celestial King had allied with 6 other Celestial Kings to snipe Ling Han, yet Ling Han was the one who had turned the tables on them and killed the Blue North Celestial King, scaring off the other 6 great Celestial Kings. Meanwhile, this Celestial King who had just spoken was one of those Celestial Kings that had been scared off previously. Chapter 2459 Attack from All Sides. Chapter 2459 Attack from All Sides. Ling Han laughed loudly. "Since one is here, the remaining ones should all be present as well, right?" "Humph." A cold sneer rang out, and another 4 Celestial Kings appeared, 2 in front and the other 2 behind. In this way, the 6 Celestial Kings had completely sealed off the path in front, behind, and above Ling Han. And sturdy walls were on either side of him. The same went for the ground below him as well. Even the powerful might of a Celestial King could not cause any damage to it, which meant that Ling Han was really and truly trapped here. Previously, it was mentioned that it would be very difficult for a Celestial King to kill another Celestial King. This had a prerequisite to it. The moment that there was a larger advantage in numbers, and the Celestial King had been surrounded, it would also be very normal for a Celestial King to be killed. If the first Celestial King had not been killed by Ling Han, there should have been a total of 7 Celestial Kings. Ling Han smiled slightly. "Haven't you guys learned enough from the last lesson?" The 5 Celestial Kings all looked wary. Previously, the Blue North Celestial King had been killed with a single toss of the sword from Ling Han, and that threat hadn't changed. The might of the Celestial Tool was truly terrifying. There was practically no way a First Heaven Celestial King could bear up against it, he could only flee and escape. Yet Yu Wudi sneered. He summoned the Violet Divine Staff. "Don't think that you are the only one who has a Celestial Tool. He only had to restrain Ling Han head-on so that the divine demon sword would not be able to unleash its might, and the other 5 celestial kings would be able to exert their full efforts to cut off Ling Han's head. If it were not for the fact that one of the celestial kings insisted on trying to blindside Ling Han, he would not have been killed by Ling Han without even managing to attack once. He could be considered as having suffered his just deserts. Primarily, he had been intimidated by Ling Han's previous kill. Even if he knew that Yu Wudi had a celestial tool, he still wasn't very reassured. They wanted to have more insurance, and schemed against Ling Han. The results were the complete opposite of his plans, as he had destroyed himself with his error in judgment. Ling Han shook his head. I had initially wondered just how frightening this trap would have been. In the end, it is just the 6 of you. Sigh, my excitement's all wasted. Ling Han, just where do you get this confidence from? Yu Wudi humphed. Since Ling Han had now entered into this trap, his fate was definitely death with no hope of survival. Ling Han looked towards those other celestial kings. There is only a single celestial tool, can you divide it equally amongst yourselves? The reason why they had previously accepted the invitation of the Blue North Celestial King was precisely because they wanted to obtain the celestial tool. One of the celestial kings spoke, his voice deep. We are also very interested in the cultivation technique that you cultivate. If you are willing to allow us to flip through your spirit, there is no definite need to kill you. Regarding this condition, Yu Wudi made no indication he opposed it. Because if Ling Han's spirit was riffled through, it would be equivalent to Ling Han having handed the power over his life to them. If they wanted to destroy his spirit, it would only be the matter of a single thought. Ling Han naturally would not fall for it. He smiled faintly. I am not interested in your suggestions. Why don't I just kill all of you, then? In your dreams, the great celestial kings rebuked. Meanwhile, Yu Wudi said, there is no need to waste words on him. This kind of person is extraordinarily stubborn, and would be holding out hope until they are faced with the grim reality. Let's move. All 6 great celestial kings looked coldly on Ling Han. An ascending origin tier, a pseudo-celestial king could be strong to this extent. This was too abnormal. The cultivation technique he cultivated had to be world-shaking. They very much wanted to take possession of it. Ling Han was all smiles, calm and unhurried. Think of the experience of the insect cave inside Hui's body. He had survived even such a crisis, so what fear would he feel towards these 6 mere celestial kings in front of him? Too bad these people did not know that unless one had once been the overlord of a realm, even if they possessed Wally's model, it would still be useless. At least, they would have to be a 9th heaven celestial king before they could be qualified to even touch this level. Hence, even if Ling Han was willing to hand Wally's model to them, not one of them would be able to learn it anyway. To say the least, even if it was taught to 9th heaven celestial kings, not even 1 in 10,000 could possibly make use of it. That was something that could allow one to advance into the heavenly venerable tier. Even if Ling Han explained this to them, it would be useless. Would Yu Wudi and the others believe him? Moreover, Ling Han had no intention of telling them such a secret, either. Then come battle. Ling Han waved the divine demon sword. After drinking the blood of another celestial king, this celestial tool was exuding a devilish gleam. The blade was covered with splotches of blood, looking very strange. Ling Han sensed it momentarily, and couldn't help but be surprised. This was celestial king blood essence. It was unknown how much ancestral king blood essence he had refined, so he would naturally not be unfamiliar with it. It was precisely because of this that he was extremely surprised. It was clear that his sword had nailed the forehead of that celestial king, so how could it be covered with blood essence? It should be known that blood essence was stored inside the heart. Could it be that the divine demon sword had the ability to actively extract blood essence? Why hadn't he realized this before? Ling Han examined it carefully. In truth, the divine demon sword was devouring the celestial king blood essence, and as the blood flowed, it was slowly becoming dimmer as the essence within was absorbed. And correspondingly, the aura that this divine sword exuded was also becoming more and more overbearing and cold. The sword was a weapon of violence, drinking blood and causing murder. Previously, he had not discovered this ability, because the enemies he killed were not at the Celestial King tier at all. The Divine Demon's sword couldn't even be bothered to drink the blood of their likes. Die. Yu Wudi was the first to charge out, and swiftly waved his staff down on Ling Han's head, planning to smash Ling Han into mush. When this staff descended, it was like the whole heaven and earth had collapsed, and space crumbled, turning into multiple whirlpools of darkness. This was the battle prowess of the peak stage of the first heaven. At present, Yu Wudi's vitality index was at least 5,400 points, and his battle prowess surpassed it slightly. The might of the staff was great, and could not be stopped. Ling Han wanted to test out his power, and slashed out towards Yu Wudi with a wave of the Divine Demon sword. Peng! The two celestial tools clashed, instantly erupting with dazzling lights. Unless they were celestial kings, potential onlookers could not even open their eyes in front of it, and what was even more terrifying was the ferocious might emanating from the two celestial tools. Even a lower-level celestial king would be breaking out in a cold sweat. What was the Violet Divine Staff? It was a precious tool forged by a ninth heaven celestial king. Even if the Imperial Void Celestial King had not entered the ranks of the strongest celestial kings at that time, his cultivation level was still there. A ninth heaven celestial king could crush a first heaven celestial king with a single finger, so the might of this celestial tool was naturally frightening. The Divine Demon Sword did not have such a background, but the level of devouring metal was even higher. In the future, it could become Heavenly Venerable tier ingredient, and had refined a few pieces of divine metal previously, as well as gulped down celestial king blood, so its murderous aura was naturally world-shaking. If Ling Han had killed those ancestral kings of the foreign realm with the Divine Demon Sword previously, the present Divine Demon Sword would definitely have been even more terrifying. Thus, when the Divine Demon Sword clashed with the Violet Divine Staff, the might it unleashed was limited, but the murderous aura was too terrifying. It was definitely not something that a first heaven celestial king could withstand. The other 5 celestial kings couldn't help but step back quickly, breaking out in a cold sweat from being weighed down by the murderous aura exuding from the celestial tool. They had lost more than half their battle prowess. If the celestial tool was not so frightening, what need would the celestial kings have to seek it out so tirelessly? Peng! Ling Han was sent sliding backwards, feeling like all the bones in his arm had been shattered. It was completely numb, and he was practically incapable of even raising his arm. In terms of power, it was indeed Yu Wudi that was on top. After all, he was a true celestial king, and a monarch star at that. If he did not have a complete upper hand in terms of power, that would be strange. Ling Han shook his arm, and blood instantly surged, releasing a sound akin to the howl of a dragon. Immediately, he recovered. His physique was not so easily dealt with, either. What are you all standing around for? Do you want to reap the harvest without sowing any seeds? Yu Wudi was irritated. The reason he had allied with these 5 great celestial kings was for the sake of dealing with Ling Han, yet now they were actually watching the show from the sidelines. How was that reasonable? Chapter 2460, Battle. Chapter 2460, Battle. With this rebuke from Yu Wudi, the 5 great celestial kings felt unspeakable distress. You both had celestial tools, which could naturally cancel out the murderous aura emanating from the other celestial tool, but what about them? If they had had celestial tools before, how could they have possibly been chased off by Ling Han? They had initially thought that once Yu Wudi unleashed his might, it would be enough to cancel out the celestial tool in Ling Han's possession, and they could then make use of the opening and make their move, taking Ling Han's life. But they had never expected that the shockwave generated by the clash of the 2 celestial tools would actually be so terrifying that celestial kings like them weren't even worthy of coming close enough. They stepped back, and then made their move. Boom, 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 colossal hands appeared one after another, striking down on Ling Han. Yu Wudi almost died of fury. What is the point of attacking from so far away? It should be known that Ling Han's physique was extremely amazing, and he could only be wounded through continuously attacking him harshly in close quarters. With such a long distance between you, are you guys scratching an itch for him? Ling Han laughed loudly, and charged out, completely ignoring the attacks of these 5 great celestial kings as he launched a fiery offensive at Yu-Wudi. His physique was extremely close to the celestial king tier, and it was equivalent to a low-level celestial king on complete defense, and it was constantly kept that way. The long-range attacks of the 5 great celestial kings were only like scratching an itch through the leather of his shoes to him, and could be completely ignored. Peng, peng, peng. Though he had also been blasted back and forth, he still charged back out completely unscathed as he sliced out at Yu-Wudi with his sword. In comparison, though the battle prowess of those bugs inside the insect cave was much lower, firstly, there were really too many of them, and secondly, the insect poison could cut down on the power of his attack and defense, so the threat they posed was actually far superior to the combined forces of these 6 celestial kings. Yu-Wudi humphed. However, since things had reached this point, he was in no mood, nor did he have the time, to bother with the 5 great celestial kings. He had a strong confidence in himself. He had already stabilized his cultivation at the celestial king tier, so how could it be that he would still be unable to suppress Ling Han? Yu-Wudi brandished the violet divine staff, clashing forcefully with Ling Han. His cultivation level was superior, so how could he fear Ling Han? Boom, boom, boom. Every move they made resulted in a forceful clash, and the clashing of the celestial tools released a thunderous noise that could shake the heaven and earth. Furthermore, as the murderous aura surged out of the celestial tools, it even solidified. The divine demon sword was emanating a black aura, while the violet divine staff was emanating a violet aura. It was like the confrontation of 2 oceans. There were ancient beasts galloping out of the murderous aura, and they pounced on their respective opponent. This was not a solid attack, but a spiritual barrage which could cause the spirit of a cultivator to sway. However, both of them were monarch stars, and each had a celestial tool as well, so they were naturally unafraid of the barrage of this kind of murderous aura, yet it was a different story for the 5 great celestial kings. Their hearts were swayed, and they had no choice but to retreat even further. Yu-Wudi couldn't help but shout, "Complete trash." Though the 5 great celestial kings could also cause some disturbance to Ling Han, it really was just a slight disturbance, and the effects were limited. He could only depend on himself. He brandished the divine staff, and struck out aggressively. The reason why he invited the 6 great celestial kings to work together with him was not because he thought that he would not be able to suppress Ling Han, but rather that he wanted the 6 of them to help in stopping Ling Han from fleeing, and that was why they had used Yang Xianlu as bait to trick Ling Han into venturing into this dead end of a valley. They had truly intended to capture Yang Xianlu, but the latter had directly broken through to the celestial king tier at the most crucial moment, and then aggressively charged through their siege and escaped. Half their plan had succeeded, but when it really came down to a battle with Ling Han, things did not progress as smoothly as expected. "Stay on your guard, don't let this brat escape," Yu-Wudi yelled out loudly. This was the only time that the 5 celestial kings could finally be useful. The 5 great celestial kings looked livid, but could not refute him. Who asked them to be indeed unable to withstand the murderous aura of the celestial tool? Yu-Wudi moved with full power, his eyes cold. Regulations seemed to have become a part of him as every single movement he made was extremely frightening, and with the addition of brandishing his celestial tool, he was practically a god of war. Ling Han's right hand gripped the sword, and he was completely fearless of clashing head-on with his opponent. Indeed, his cultivation was considerably inferior, but with how tough his physique was, what did he have to fear? Meanwhile, his left hand surged with regulations. Fields of lightning surged out, turning into a sea of lightning. Space was sealed off, imprisoned, while time was frozen and slowed. Meanwhile, regulation of slaughter was boosting the divine demon sword. He, too, was proficiently playing around with regulations. It should be known that he had a shocking number of celestial seed marks in his body. They numbered in the hundreds already, and if every single celestial seed mark matured, that would correspond to the regulations of the Great Tao. And Great Tao was limited. Hence, a considerable number of the over 100 celestial seeds were actually duplicates, but there were differences in the minor details. After all, Celestial King Tier had 9 heavens, and celestial seeds, too, could evolve 9 times before finally reaching the pinnacle. Having grasped so many celestial seed marks, Ling Han's practice of regulations had also practically reached its limits. Just as Ling Han had planned previously, he would extract the essence of countless celestial seed marks and nurture a perfect celestial seed that belonged solely to him. Only such a celestial seed could truly be considered perfect. In the intense battle, Ling Han's appreciation of Great Tao deepened, and he felt an urge to break through, unable to control his cultivation level. This, too, reflected on himself as celestial light endlessly surged from him. There was a celestial king tier aura blazing. Humph, you think of breaking through to the celestial king tier to resolve the crisis? Yu Wudi sneered. Even if you undergo the heavenly tribulation, I will still kill you. He thought that it was because Ling Han felt like he could not hold on for much longer, and thus planned to undergo the heavenly tribulation to resolve his crisis. He was determined even if Ling Han was to experience the heavenly tribulation, he would still forcibly kill him. After all, without experiencing the heavenly tribulation to the end, there was no way he could truly reach the celestial king tier. Ling Han smiled faintly. If Yu Wudi was determined to entertain such wishful thinking, the former would just allow him to keep this mistaken perception. Yu Wudi's offensive became even stronger. He wanted Ling Han to become distracted, and the moment the latter became distracted in his breakthrough, the resulting consequences would be extremely terrifying. Being unable to break through was a small issue, but it was very highly possible that it could wound his essence. The other 5 celestial kings also strengthened their attacks. Like Yu Wudi, they thought that Ling Han was going to give out soon. Yet Ling Han was extremely calm. A thought flashed through his mind. Perhaps it was time to condense his own celestial seed. He did not have to immediately nurture the celestial seed, but he could try extracting the essence of those celestial seed marks in his body, and begin to walk out his own path. In the future, when he obtained even more and stronger celestial seeds, he would still be able to continue extracting their essence to upgrade that unique celestial seed of his. With this thought in mind, his heart blazed. Boom, a world-shaking change began to take place inside his body. Kwong, kwong, kwong. In his mind, all the celestial seed marks were crumbling and falling into pieces, as if they had been set upon with fiery flames, and were presently melting down rapidly. But in the center of these celestial seed marks, a new mark was silently forming. Though it was only composed of simple strokes, the aura it exuded seemed capable of shaking the heavens for eternity. Boom, dark clouds suddenly rolled out in the skies, lightning flashing closely together. A heavenly tribulation was forming. This was too shocking. Ling Han clearly hadn't formed the celestial seed yet. This was only the basic form of a celestial seed mark, but its appearance caused the heaven and earth to be moved, intending to strike down with lightning to erase him, which showed just how powerful this celestial seed mark was. There was no absolutely perfect and flawless celestial seed in the world. The best celestial seed was one that was the most suited to oneself. Enlightenment flickered in Ling Han's heart. The other celestial seed marks crumbled and collapsed like they were structures that had been corroded by time, and in their midst, the basic form of the celestial seed was silently taking form. Chapter 2461, A Strange Heavenly Tribulation. Chapter 2461, A Strange Heavenly Tribulation. Before setting out onto the celestial path, everyone said that a naturally complete celestial seed would be far superior to a celestial seed formed from shards. However, this was not an absolute truth. Ling Han had already obtained enough complete celestial seeds, extracted their essence, and formed a completely new celestial seed. According to the previous theory, this was a kind of weakening as it was actually pieced together from shards. However, Ling Han only extracted their most fundamental essence, and added with his own appreciation, the celestial seed formed from all this was truly strongest for him. And now, the celestial seed hadn't even formed completely yet, but the heavenly tribulation had already arrived. This was enough proof of how amazing the celestial seed that Ling Han would form in the future would be. The heavens were jealous. Clang, an extremely terrifying bolt of lightning immediately struck. Don't allow him to undergo the heavenly tribulation, or all our schemes will result in nothing. Yu Wudi called out loudly, and rushed into the heavenly tribulation without paying it any mind at all as he brandished the violet divine staff, intending to stop Ling Han from breaking through. Though the 5 great celestial kings did not want to undergo a heavenly tribulation very much, they thought about the secret that Ling Han was hiding. It was something that could allow the power of a pseudo-celestial king to face a true celestial king head-on, so just how amazing did it have to be? Their greed got the better of them, and they continued charging in to attack while gritting their teeth. Kwong, the heaven and earth felt no mercy, and were just to anyone and everyone. If one interfered in the heavenly tribulation of another, they would have to bear their punishment. 6 clumps of dark clouds unleashed power at practically the same moment, and a frightening heavenly tribulation immediately descended. The 6 great celestial kings were hard-pressed. Interfering in the heavenly tribulation of another, they would definitely be targeted by the heaven and earth and dragged into it as well. But the heavenly tribulation they sustained would definitely be based on their respective cultivation levels. For example, Ling Han was only a pseudo-celestial king, but the other 6 were true celestial kings, so the heavenly tribulation they suffered would naturally be even more powerful. Though the 6 great celestial kings were still attacking Ling Han, their might was considerably weakened. They were all focusing the greater part of their energy on resisting their respective heavenly tribulation. Thankfully, what did not disappoint them was that the heavenly tribulation that Ling Han was undergoing was incredibly frightening, and he was thrown back and forth as he was endlessly struck by lightning, the sight of it being too horrible to look at. "Keep it up. We're almost about to kill him." The 6 great celestial kings all cheered themselves on. However, what they did not know was that the reason why Ling Han would look so battered was not because he really was no match for the heavenly tribulation, but rather because he had focused the majority of his concentration on forming the celestial seed mark. The heaven and earth did not really intend to kill him through delivering a punishment, it was an attempt to disrupt him from forming this celestial seed that would be flawless for him. Ling Han naturally would not let the heaven and earth succeed. Hence, he would rather become terribly battered or even covered with wounds all over. He was determined to fully concentrate on forming the celestial seed. If anyone could cast a look into his mind, they would see that all the celestial seed marks had already crumbled and shattered, but the shards thus produced were dancing. There were tiny points of light floating, gliding towards the central area. Here, a new celestial seed mark was presently forming, but its main structure did not belong to any complete celestial seed. Ling Han had built it with his own comprehension. This was too immature. How could the comprehension of an individual compare to the heaven and earth? However, Ling Han was one who had endless contact with void particle energy, the fundamental power of the Genesis world, and he had once been the overlord of a realm himself, though it was only at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, but that still far surpassed the celestial king tier, after all. Now he was using these 2 kinds of experience as his guide to build the main structure of his own celestial seed mark. How could this not be amazing? Even Ji Wuming could not compare to him. After all, the former had only been a 9th heaven celestial king in his last life, and no matter how powerful he was, he could not cross this boundary, and had his own limits. Crack, crack, crack. The heavenly tribulation was merciless, every lightning bolt being stronger than the last. At the beginning, it only wanted to disrupt Ling Han, but it soon became even fiercer and more intense. Since the process could not be disrupted, then it would directly erase Ling Han. The power was extremely frightening, and had crossed the threshold of the first heaven, forcing Ling Han into dire straits. All the clothes he was wearing had long since been torn to pieces, lacerations adorned his flesh, and even the aroma of grilled meat could be smelled. But a smile appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. He obviously knew this was a trap, and still insisted on barging in. Aside from wanting to kill the main culprits, there was another very important reason: to use the pressure that these people would exert on him as help to take that most crucial step. Ling Han was the type to be more motivated with more pressure. Being ambushed by 6 great celestial kings, he felt a sense of crisis, as well as a powerful displeasure. He yearned to gain greater strength so he could destroy these people. In his mind, the celestial seed mark was becoming more and more complete. A frightening aura was surging out of his body. It was at the celestial king tier. It was clear that he had not advanced into the celestial king tier, yet actually already possessed the image of a celestial king. This was too astonishing. No wonder the heaven and earth would be so furious and determined to destroy him. Because he was an anomaly that looked capable of removing himself from the control of the heaven and earth. Not good, he's going to break through. Yu Wudi was shocked, and brandished his staff even more furiously, practically paying no mind to his own defense at all. The other 5 celestial kings also seemed like they had thrown their lives on the line. If they could not stop Ling Han, the moment he broke through and became a celestial king, it would be practically impossible for them to stop Ling Han from escaping. The 6 great celestial kings seemed to have descended into madness, bursting with their full battle prowess, and madly pouring attacks on Ling Han. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven's scroll, and allowed the blasts from the 6 great celestial kings and the heavenly tribulation to land on him. He had already reached a crucial point, and could not sustain any disturbance. He had to gather his full concentration. The celestial seed mark was close to forming, but there was still a node left. Once this node formed, the celestial seed mark would take form completely, and could not be shaken. However, if he failed, this celestial seed mark that was close to completion would crumble instantly. Originally, this process could be as long as 10,000 years, a million years, or even longer, but Ling Han wanted to complete it in a short 1 or 2 days, or even shorter time, under such great pressure. Long, half a day passed, and the heavenly tribulation of the 6 great celestial kings was already beginning to disperse, but the tribulation clouds above Ling Han's head were still dense, clinging closely together without any sign of dispersing. There were still lightning bolts striking down madly. This scene stunned Yu Wudi and the others greatly, and they involuntarily stopped their attacks. Shouldn't a heavenly tribulation just last half a day? The heavens would try their utter hardest to prevent any elites from emerging, because the stronger the living beings, the more possible it would be that they could affect the balance of heaven and earth. Thus, every time a living being became stronger, a heavenly tribulation would descend, and stop them from breaking through. But the heavens would also leave a chance of survival. A heavenly tribulation would only last for half a day, and if he survived, that would mean he had gained the approval of the heaven and earth. But why did it seem like this was akin to a difficult birth for Ling Han? Half a day had passed, so why was the lightning still striking down endlessly onto the ground? Was this because Ling Han had offended the heavens, and thus the heavens could not bear the sight of him? Was that why the heavenly tribulation was descending multiplied like this? Yu Wudi and the others exchanged looks. At this moment, they did not know whether they should continue their attacks. All this was too strange. If they angered the heavens, which led to them also having to suffer heavenly tribulation every day, what would they do? If we made another move, would we still be attacked by the heavenly tribulation? One of the celestial kings asked. Ordinarily, this question would seem very foolish. You had already been dragged into the heavenly tribulation, and it had similarly lasted for half a day. It definitely would end later than that of the person whose heavenly tribulation was disrupted, so how could one possibly continue to be dragged in? Yet this situation of Ling Han had never been seen before. The person who caused the disturbance had already finished sustaining the heavenly tribulation, yet the victim himself was still undergoing the heavenly tribulation. But who would have experienced this before, and thus be sure that they would no longer be pulled into the heavenly tribulation should they interfere now? They had to be seeing things. Chapter 2462, The Most Perfect Celestial Seed. Chapter 2462, The Most Perfect Celestial Seed. Whomever they told this matter to, it was guaranteed that not a single one would believe it, even if the person who had said it was a celestial king, or even if 6 celestial kings swore that it was true simultaneously. Fuck, how could something so unbelievable happen? Even if you are a celestial king, you cannot treat us like idiots, either. Yu Wudi was filled with jealousy. He did not know why Ling Han's tribulation would last so long, but the heavenly tribulation represented the jealousy of the heavens. They were so jealous that they did not hesitate from going against their own rules, and deploying an unending heavenly tribulation, which showed just how outstanding and extraordinary Ling Han was. That was the only reason why the heaven and earth did not want him to break through. Yu Wudi had to stop him. Die. Brandishing the violet divine staff, he charged towards Ling Han again. The divine staff released its might, blasting out a purple halo of brilliance. Ling Han greeted the oncoming attack with the divine demon sword. This was only his subconscious movement. The divine staff was too powerful, and he did not dare to take it head-on even with his physique. He had to block it. Peng! Sword and staff clashed, and Ling Han was instantly sent flying. With a WA, blood was spat out of his mouth. The other 5 celestial kings discovered that the heavenly tribulation did not target Yu Wudi any further, much to their surprise. This had definitely broken records. He had attacked a person who was undergoing a heavenly tribulation, yet he himself was actually not dragged into the heavenly tribulation, though they had previously already undergone a tribulation. Die! The 5 celestial kings roared as they blasted at Ling Han too. If they did not make their move now, when would they have another chance? This time, the pressure on Ling Han was even greater. Previously, though the 6 celestial kings had also been attacking in unison, they had focused the majority of their energy on opposing the heavenly tribulation. It was different now. They could completely concentrate on their offensive. It should be known that they were all celestial kings, and 5 of them were at the peak stage of the first heaven, and while Yu Wudi's cultivation level was not all that high, he was a monarch star. His battle prowess did not lose out to theirs, either, what more when he held such a deadly weapon like the violet divine staff, so the threat he posed was massive. Ling Han was completely battered and bruised from the attacks. He had to both face the heavenly tribulation and suffer being under the combined attacks of 6 great celestial kings at the same time. More importantly, he still had to focus the major part of his energy on forming the celestial seed mark. This was practically a mission impossible, but Ling Han's battle spirit was still soaring to the extreme. He enjoyed being challenged and the need to create miracles in impossible situations. Pa. Even if his godly bones were tough, being under such a terrifying barrage of attacks, they still broke, and his flesh had naturally long since been torn apart. Blood covered his whole body, and poured all over the ground. At present, his condition was horrible to the extreme. A few bones jutted out of his body, and his bone marrow was visible. There was definitely no way his family and friends would be able to recognize him now. Yet Ling Han did not feel the slightest bit of despair. On the contrary, his battle spirit soared high, and his fighting spirit burned fiercely. He anticipated the completion of the celestial seed mark. That moment would be the instant that he would turn the tables on his enemies and counterattack aggressively. He used the greatest eternity everlasting physique, and exerted time acceleration effects on himself. An instant was equivalent to several days, or even several weeks. Faster. Boom! His body trembled as he entered into a certain mysterious state. Everything had stopped and become silent. He could clearly see the twisted expressions on the faces of the 6 great celestial kings which were changing slightly bit by bit. It was as if he was removed from this heaven and earth, and become an outsider looking in. He could see the time stream as it slowly unfolded in front of him, flowing towards the future, but connected to the past. However, a mysterious power was sealing it off. He could not cross the river, nor could he walk along the banks, tracing back history or exploring the future. He could only be limited to this state, and within this space. Had time stopped? Ling Han looked at the heavens. This was his divine sense flitting. He could see bolts of lightning strike down, but their speed seemed to have decreased to a chilling extent. They could only descend no more than an inch in the time a single breath would take. Enlightenment rose in his heart. Previously, he had added a heavy stroke to the celestial seed mark, and it was his comprehension of the regulations of time. Furthermore, he had activated the greatest eternity everlasting physique, which seemed to have touched on some mysterious state. It was not time that had stopped, but rather the channeling of his divine sense had surpassed time itself. Hence, he could not move his physical body, but it was like his spirit had transcended. He felt an urge to allow his spirit to leave his physical body. In this way, his spirit would be able to roam the heaven and earth without anything holding him back, and would no longer be limited by any kind of regulations, no longer being detained by any powerful being. However, He immediately suppressed this urge. The spirit was rooted in the physical body. If the physical body was lost, the spirit would also soon wilt and die. His heart clenched as he focused on the celestial seed mark. At this time, he could truly concentrate completely on the building of the celestial seed mark. Stroke after stroke, the celestial seed mark would be that bit more complete every time he experienced enlightenment. It was like a precious crystalline tower in his mind, dazzling all directions. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. Time flashed by. When time had reached over 700 years, that bolt of lightning finally struck him, and was slashed apart by a wave of the divine demon sword. As for the attacks of the 6 great celestial kings, Ling Han estimated its speed, determining that the first attack would probably land in only another 6 years. He continued progressing with his own affairs, as if an instant was an eternity. It was unknown how many years had passed when Ling Han suddenly felt his body relax. A strange power surged out, and the regulations of heaven and earth manifested completely in front of him. It was as if he could just casually pluck any one of them, and turn it into his own weapon. The Celestial King tier. Only a Celestial King would be able to pull on regulations at will, but it was clear he had not advanced into the Celestial King tier, so why had he truly gained the power of a true Celestial King? In a moment of distraction, he leaped out of this state. Instantly, time returned to normal. Boom! The attacks of the 6 great celestial kings blasted out madly. Peng! Dust filled the air, turning into a mushroom cloud that rushed into the skies. Is he dead? A frightening power surged, and the 6 great celestial kings stopped their offensive. The reverberation of the aftermath was too strong, and even they did not dare to barge rashly in. This brat was suddenly dazed for a moment. If that had not been the case, our final attack might not have succeeded. The 6 celestial kings said so. Ling Han had suddenly faltered for a moment previously, and their attacks had thus landed solidly on him. This was extremely strange. Could it be a trap? One of the celestial kings asked. You're worrying too much. What kind of trap would have one be blasted straight on by 6 great celestial kings? Yu Wudi also humphed coldly. He was very certain that he had struck solidly with the violet divine staff. With how destructive a celestial tool was, even a celestial king would die from a direct hit, what more when it was a pseudo-celestial king that was undergoing a tribulation? Ling Han had to be dead. He's definitely dead. Don't you see that even the heavenly tribulation has stopped? All the 6 great celestial kings nodded in agreement. Ling Han could deceive them, but there was no possible way he could deceive the heaven and earth. Now that the heavenly tribulation had abruptly stopped, that meant only one thing: Ling Han was dead. They were all waiting. Once the aftermath of power weakened just a little bit more, they would rush in and pluck Ling Han's spirit. It would only take a little time, and their power as celestial kings would definitely allow them to easily gather a dispersed spirit. Boom! Right at this moment, a flame suddenly rushed into the skies, burning fiercely. Even from very far, the intense heat could still be felt. The 6 great celestial kings were all silenced at the same time, and then their expressions drastically changed. The rising from the ashes of the immortal Phoenix tribe. A terrifying aura blazed, and a figure walked out of the fiery light. He was of tall, lanky build, and not very sturdy in frame, but the aura he exuded was overbearing without compare, as if he was a heavenly emperor. Ling Han. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,